I was born in the bayou of New Orleans and raised in the swamps of South Florida. The daughter and niece of dynamic educators, education has always been a driving force in my life. My mother grew up humbly in the city of Pahokee, Florida, and made it her mission to ensure that I received the very best education possible. She wanted to make sure that I was afforded the opportunities and access that she didn't have growing up. She was a first-generation college student and had an incredible work ethic. She made sacrifices to send me to private school through elementary and made sure that I had every experience necessary to be accepted into one of the top-performing art schools in our country. I graduated north of a 3.5 with AP classes and enough extracurriculars that my mother put me in to fill up a 3-page resume. But when I look back at my schooling, I remember very little about the academic content. I remember very little about what those around me did. But what I do remember is the way that I felt. The late, great Maya Angelou once said that people don't remember the things that you say, and people don't remember the things that you do. People will always remember the way that you made them feel. I remember being in school feeling loved, heard, cared for, challenged, and valued. My opinion, my perspective, my experience mattered. Upon high school graduation, I naively believed that in this new millennium, every student across our country had a shared schooling experience. It took a life-changing event for me to realize just how skewed my perception was from reality. It was my sophomore year at Florida State. I walk into my dorm room, put down my bag, and turn on the TV. Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5 storm system, is on a direct path to the bayou. The governor, mayor, law officials mandate evacuation and urge residents of New Orleans to leave. Those that can, do, and those that can't, stay. It was a painful, visual, palpable example of inequity. At 5 a.m., 1 hour before Katrina makes landfall, levees in and around New Orleans begin to breach. In total, 50 levees and storm walls fail, and 80% of the city of New Orleans is underwater. 100,000 residents remain in the city. So what do you do? What do you do when you don't have the means to be able to evacuate? How do you adequately prepare and protect your family? How do you navigate a system that is not designed to elevate your voice and empower you, but is instead designed to keep you at bay? It wasn't until after the water subsided that the true impact of Katrina was realized. 1,577 casualties, 134,000 homes destroyed. In education, 110 schools were destroyed, leaving only 12 remaining in the city, and 400,000 students in Katrina-impacted areas were displaced. An unimaginable catastrophe, and yet the invisible wounds proved the most difficult to heal. Shortly after the storm, it was estimated that 1 out of every 3 adults suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And while the city was rebuilding and homes were being reconstructed, hundreds of thousands of New Orleanians were struggling to cope with the most tragic experience of their life. And imagine this from the perspective of a child. Your school, your home, your friends, your community, everything that makes you feel whole is gone. Over the past decade, I've had the opportunity to travel across the country to see schools in action, specifically focusing on schools that serve disadvantaged and marginalized communities. 60 years after the Supreme Court ruled separate but equal unconstitutional, our public education system still remains heavily separated by race. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 70% of Black children in the US attend predominantly Black schools, and 72% of Black students attend high poverty schools based on the income of the community served. I wanted to learn more about these schools and the experience of Black and brown students within them. How are these schools supporting students that have faced trauma? How are they empowering them and affirming their identities? And how are they working to dismantle systems of oppression and providing students with the tools that they need to navigate and improve our world? What I found in these schools is that far too often, students are being told what to do, how to think, and even more intensely, how to behave. Schools lack joy and innovation as classrooms chase after control and compliance. Students are disengaged, but asked to remain silent. Students often look down or away when being called on, movement is frowned upon, and outbursts, laughter, conversations are deemed as off-task behavior. Teenagers are still asked to walk in a straight line with their hands to their side as they move from one classroom to the next. You can imagine why dropout rates are high and attendance is low in these types of learning environments. There are strict rules and policies that students must abide by, and students can be suspended, expelled, and even sometimes arrested for dress code violation, talking back to a teacher, skipping class. And the number one reason why students are suspended in the US is for willful defiance, which is another way of saying not doing what you're told. DeAndre Arnold recently made national news after he was indefinitely suspended for the length of his dreadlocks, a nod to his Trinidadian culture. And Kiara Wilmot, an honor student, was taken away in handcuffs after her science experiment exploded in the hallway. Kiara received a 10-day suspension, was charged with 2 felonies, and faced expulsion. Nationally, Latino and Black students are suspended 3 times more than their white counterparts for the same infraction. This distorted notion of what schools have become have led to the term school to prison pipeline. The term refers to the disproportionate tendencies of minors from impoverished communities to be incarcerated because of harsh district and school policies. 3.3 million students are suspended every year. And once a student drops out, they are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated than a youth that completes high school. 8 times. So let's connect this back to New Orleans after Katrina, where the concept of normal has been shattered and families are experiencing inconceivable amounts of trauma. Imagine being suspended for not being in uniform, for lashing out at a teacher, for skipping class. We must think differently about what schools could and should be, especially during the age of COVID, social unrest, and racial injustice, where students of all ethnicities are facing more instances of trauma and visual exposure to hate and violence than ever before. We must think differently about the purpose and structures of our school. It is our time to create a more just and equal society, and it begins by pouring into the next generation of world leaders. Imagine a place where you are celebrated for your strengths. You are allowed to explore your passions, and you are seen as an individual with an individual story and individual experiences. There might be difficult days that you have, and instead of reprimanded, you are affirmed. There might be days that you doubt yourself, where you duck off in a hallway bathroom to avoid being noticed. And instead of being disciplined, you are found, you are seen, and you are empowered. That is the type of school that I wanted to create. I returned to New Orleans just a couple of years after the storm, during the recovery phase. My family was tragically impacted by Katrina, and I lost my brother in the aftermath. Looking at my niece and nephew, I wanted to create the type of school where they would thrive, where others that had experienced unimaginable trauma could feel whole. When I stepped into the role of principal of a middle school in New Orleans, I wanted to shake up the notion of what a school could be. I did this by focusing on 3 key components: trust, joy, and power. I created trust through intentional relationship building. Every student, every teacher, every faculty member was placed into one of 4 houses named after New Orleans leaders: Ruby Bridges, Donna Brazil, Troy Andrew, and Dr. Norman Francis. This shrunk the feeling of our school, and every single student felt a part of a community. They felt a part of a family. Our students loved, cared for, and cheered on the other students in the houses. And our teachers, they served as guardians, as protectors, as friends, as mentors to our students. Students learned how to build deep and authentic, healthy relationships with each other. And our teachers learned to see our students as individuals with individual stories and individual experiences. Secondly, I focused on joy. I wanted to sprinkle magic and laughter and smiles in every part of our building. I wanted our school to be a place of love and positivity that affirmed the identity of our students. Too often they hear stories on the news that criminalize people that look like them. So I created a social leadership block where every day we had the opportunity to talk about Black leaders, the accomplishments of those that look like them, current and historical. We talked about current events. We talked about politics. And they had a chance to share their ideas for what they wanted the world to look and feel like. We also created joy by honoring their heritage. They are descendants of colorful, passionate tribes where loud and joyful celebrations defined who they were. This was so important in establishing this culture at our school. When kids walk into the classroom, there's vibrant music there to greet them. They're on the floor making songs and chants with their teachers, and we have massive celebrations where our students can act and sing and dance and laugh and compete with the other houses. These are a really big deal at our school. And finally, we elevated their voices. We honored their voices. We intentionally taught our students how to not only advocate for themselves, but to advocate for others. Children are people. They have feelings, they have thoughts, they have ideas. They are indeed our next generation of leaders. Instead of creating rules and regulations that extinguish their light, we created a space that amplified it. Our students can tell you that we use this phrase, be big, be bold, and have no fear. When our students speak, they stand up on desks and chairs. They look at their teammates in their eyes and they command the room because what they have to say is that important. And sometimes they disagree with us. We listen. This might be through a tantrum in the hallway, or it could be through an eloquently polished speech. Either way, it is a plea for our attention, and we listen. Our students know their voice matters, and it can change their house, school, community, and our world. Are we a perfect school? No. Do we make mistakes often? Yes. Has our method worked? Without a doubt. Over the past 4 years, our school has been recognized for having top growth in the state. We've received an A letter grade 4 years in a row for top growth. And the state of Louisiana has recognized us for 2 years in a row for exceptional performance. So what is the difference? Trust, joy, and power. Our students feel safe enough to be in the classroom, take academic risk, stand up when they don't know the answer, engage with their teammates because they know that their teammates and their teachers have their back. They come to school because they can laugh, they can sing, they can dance, they can authentically be themselves. They feel powerful, they know their voice matters, they know who they are and where they come from, and they know they can lead and help change the world. We must think differently about what schools can be. We must reimagine what schools can be. Challenge inequitable systems, challenge the status quo, go off script, break barriers, think innovatively. The next generation is here, and our future lies in their hands. Will we create schools that oppress or empower, that breed joy or breed fear, that builds trust or builds walls? Their future lies in our hands. Thank you.